you guys so much for being here. I have a lot of admiration for poets because I am not at all poetic. So when I hear you guys, I just think it's very awesome. Okay, so this is an excerpt from my memoir. My memoir is titled Victim, Survivor, Warrior. And at this point in the book, I had been fighting in family court to protect my son from his father, Joaquin. And in addition to suffering from the abusive relationship with Joaquin, I had recently learned that Joaquin was a suspect in 2 murders, the murder of his oldest son's mother and his own mother. So this chapter is called Casualty of War. For nearly an hour, almost every night, I watched you sleep. Often, after I put you to bed, you'd open just one eye just to make sure I was still there. Just as I would try to back out of the room, you'd sit up and give me a huge smile to entice me to stay. It worked every single time. You knew exactly how to melt my heart with your smile. I love you, my little prince. I worried about Prince all day and every day. The thought of him alone with his father Joaquin would send me into a panic attack. I became obsessed with trying to determine what Joaquin's endgame was. Prince had a supervised visit with Joaquin the week before his first birthday. Trying to stay one step ahead of a crazy person will make you feel like you're going crazy. During the birthday visit, Joaquin bought Prince a Build-A-Bear. This was the very first thing Joaquin had ever gotten him. Naturally, I was skeptical of this furry creature. Part of me thought, come on, Hera, it's just a bear. But then the crazy protective mom voice said, wait a second, he never does anything just because he's trying to be nice. My first instinct was to tear the bear apart with my teeth and throw it in the mall trash can, next to where I was standing with my mom and aunts when I first saw it. But I decided to do the saner thing and ask them. One of my aunts said, even before she knew how I was feeling, you better check to make sure he didn't bug it. The other said, it's too risky, just throw it out, don't even let it in the car. Let's destroy the bear, said my mom, both furious and with a strong sense of conviction. I shook my head, threw it in the box, and took my son home. I thought about the stupid bear the entire ride home. I suspected it was purchased in order to look good in front of Diane, the retired police officer who supervised the visits. She was set to testify in court the next day. I felt guilty at the thought of destroying it because I was in near constant mourning over the reality that my son didn't have a loving father. I wished that Joaquin could have been the type of person who simply wanted to do something nice for his son. But I knew him well enough to know this wasn't true. I didn't trust it, so the bear spent the night in the garage. The next morning, I walked downstairs after spending the entire night dreaming about that damn bear. My mother was awake when I arrived in the kitchen. So, what are you going to do with the bear? She asked, appearing as though she had lost just as much sleep as I did over this ridiculous fiasco. This is crazy, we're being paranoid. I quickly escaped the conversation, grabbed my travel mug full of coffee, and rushed out the door to work. On the drive to work, I couldn't stop trying to figure out if I wasn't taking this serious enough. Was my mother right to be so worried? This is a man who had been lying and terrorizing me since he met me. A bear couldn't just be a bear. Once I got to work, I brought it up with my coworkers. Oh yeah, I bet that thing is totally bugged, one of them said, only fueling the fire of this crazy town. What if he tried to turn it into one of those nanny cam type things? That would be totally creepy, said another. These people clearly did nothing to bring me back to the land of the sane. I should have known better than to ask a bunch of case officers at the Central Intelligence Agency whether or not I should trust the situation. On my drive home, my mom called to ask about the bear. Okay, Mommy, if you really want to check, just do it, I said, frustrating that we had still been obsessing over this thing an entire day later. Okay, good, I already did, she responded, followed by a brief silence as I waited to learn exactly what she had done to the bear. She had cut off the bear's head and ripped out all of its stuffing. Of course, there was nothing there. It was just a bear filled with stuffing and a fake heart. I felt terrible and crazy. My mom told me I shouldn't feel bad and that the bear was a casualty of war. But it wasn't just a bear. It had become a symbol of the environment of distrust. This relationship wasn't sustainable. It was impossible for me to stop worrying about my son, and after Joaquin proved so many times what he was capable of, there was no way I would ever trust his intentions towards Prince. Several months after Prince's birthday, the judge lifted supervised visits, and allowed Joaquin to have Prince for 7 hours every other week. Dropping Prince off with Joaquin always felt as though it would be the last time I'd see him. I had a hard time enjoying anything because I was stressed out the entire week before the visit. The night before the 4th unsupervised visit, I got home later than usual. Prince greeted me with what I like to call the mama dance. He stood at the glass door that separated the garage from the main house, waiting for me to arrive. As soon as I came through the door, his entire face lit up. He lifted his arms in the air and wiggled his little butt. Of course, his butt was smaller than mine. All the anger I harbored at my job for getting stuck there late melted away when I saw Prince dancing. I ran through the door, lifted him into my arms, and kissed him all over his face. He giggled and leaned into my hug. The next morning, Prince left in and woke up with a huge smile on his face. He threw blocks at the dogs, hugged me, hugged my mother, and ate his baby yogurt. I tried to think of an excuse to keep him home that day, but came up short. Diane had already warned me that if I canceled another visit without a doctor's note, she would give Joaquin the ammunition he needed to take me back to court for violating the order. "It's gonna be okay, baby. Mama loves you so much. Have a good day, baby, and I'll see you tonight." I whispered softly in his ear when it was time to say goodbye. I looked at Prince, lifted him out of the car, and hugged him close to me. "I love you, Gigi Bean," I said to him while strapping him into the car seat of Diane's car. Gigi Bean was one of the many nicknames I had for him. I was nervous all day and anxiously awaited the time I could return and pick him up. I was working during the visit, trying to make more money so that I could pay for my attorneys. While at my desk, my mother called. "Harry, you need to leave work now. Something happened. Prince is in the hospital," she said. Her voice sounded panicked. Before she finished explaining, I dropped the phone and ran out of the office. I'm not a fast runner, but that day I ran the fastest mile of my life. As I ran through the empty halls, my footsteps echoing as my feet stomped across the marble floors, horrible thoughts flashed through my mind. I shouldn't have sent him. I should have run. I should have kept him with me, I thought, jumping into my car and speeding out of the gates of the compound. Okay, so Prince must have had another febrile seizure, and they must have just taken him to the hospital. It'll be fine, just like last time. I tried to remain calm, speaking audibly as I drove. Then a police officer called me. He didn't give me any medical information, other than that Prince was being flown to a different hospital. It was weird that nobody was talking to me while I was driving. Why weren't they telling me what happened? Why did a police officer call me? After 3 hours of waiting, pacing the hallway of the pediatric ICU, just a few halls from where I gave birth to Prince just 15 months prior, I was finally led back to see him. As I looked through the glass of the room, my heart broke. I saw my baby lying in the bed, unconscious and full of tubes. I entered the room and touched his forehead, and he was cold as ice. I will never forget how cold his hair felt. Before that moment, I didn't know hair could feel that cold. As the doctor saw me touch Prince, she grabbed my arm and told me she needed to talk to me. Prince suffered cardiac arrest. We don't know what happened at this time. He's not responsive to the medication. He's on a ventilator, and the prognosis is poor. He will likely die. He will likely die soon. If he doesn't die, he will have significant neurological deficits. The doctor spoke in a deadpan voice, completely devoid of emotion. I was in shock, hoping that at any moment I would wake from this nightmare. I walked over to Prince and held his hand. Before I knew it, the nurses tried to shove a chair under me as I fell to the ground. My world was slipping away. Prince was gone, and I was staring at his empty body. It was clear to me that his soul had already passed on. My heart ached worse at the knowledge that I wasn't there when this happened. I wished I could have been with him. Maybe I could have protected him. The doctors didn't know what happened, but I knew from the moment I saw Prince's lifeless body, his father killed him. Joaquin carried out my biggest fear, the thing my own attorneys believed I was crazy for worrying about. I sung to him and cried, "Please don't leave me, baby. Mama loves you so much." For some reason, I still wanted to believe that Prince would be able to find his way back to me. It took 48 hours for doctors to officially declare Prince brain dead. Since a criminal investigation surrounding the circumstances of his death had already begun, waiting was an essential part of evidence preservation. I sat by his side the entire time as his little body shut down. The smell was awful, inescapable, and every whiff slapped me in the face with the reality of what was happening to him. Fury boiled inside of me, and I could feel myself transforming into someone who was merely the shell of the pushover I once was. Finally, after 48 hours, Prince was pronounced dead. The nurses handed me his lifeless body, took the collar off his neck, and unplugged him from life support. Blood poured out of him and all over me. He officially died in my arms on October 21st, 2012, at 8:38 p.m. Part of me died with him that night. I knew there was no way I could unlive that moment, no matter how much I wished I could. When I arrived home later that night, I noticed that headless Build-A-Bear lying on the floor as I pulled into the garage. I assumed that my mother had thrown it away after she tore its head off, but it had been lying on the floor ever since the day it was destroyed. Every time I pulled into the garage prior to this day, I was too busy being Prince's mother to notice that it was still lying there. As soon as I parked the car, I jumped out, grabbed the bear, and threw it out of the house into the pouring rain. Thank you.